There is a sound every parent dreads. The silence. Not the soft quiet of a child asleep, but the heavy, unnatural stillness when you realize your son or daughter is no longer in the room, and you have no idea where they've gone. Across the world, thousands of children vanish every single year. Some are found within hours. Others never return. For the parents, the clock stops ticking the moment their child disappears. Time becomes a cruel loop of questions, searches, and empty hope. America knows this horror well, and it began, for many, on a spring morning in 1979, when a 6-year-old boy named Etan Patz walked out of his family's apartment in Manhattan, never to be seen alive again. It was May 25th, the first truly warm day of the year. Etan's mother, Julie, was running late. Etan begged her, "Please, Mom, let me walk to the bus stop by myself, just this once." The bus stop was only 2 blocks away. In a neighborhood like Soho, where neighbors knew each other, it felt safe. Julie kissed him goodbye. She watched him leave, his small backpack bouncing on his shoulders. A little boy, grinning, proud of his independence. He never made it to the bus. When Etan didn't return home that afternoon, panic spread through the Patz household. Calls were made. Friends were asked. By nightfall, hundreds of posters with his face were taped to lampposts and storefronts. Etan's big brown eyes stared out from paper sheets that fluttered in the summer wind. But Manhattan in the late 70s was a different place. Crime was high. The police were overloaded. And a missing child? Back then, the system didn't treat it as urgently as today. In fact, in 1979, there was no Amber Alert, no nationwide media blitz. Children were considered runaways unless proven otherwise. Days turned into weeks, weeks into years. Etan's face became one of the first to ever appear on a milk carton, as part of a new campaign to raise awareness about missing children. He became a symbol, a face everyone knew, but no one could save. For decades, his case haunted New York. Theories swirled. Kidnappers, predators, organized rings. Detectives chased leads across states, but the trail always went cold. Etan had vanished into thin air, swallowed by the city itself. And for every parent watching the news in 1979, a seed of fear was planted. If it could happen to Julie and Stanley Patz, it could happen to anyone. The myth of safety was broken. If the disappearance of Etan Patz cracked the illusion of safety in America, the murder of JonBenét Ramsey shattered it completely. It was Christmas night, 1996. Boulder, Colorado. A city known for quiet neighborhoods, snow-dusted roofs, and safe suburban streets. But behind the walls of the Ramsey household, something dark was about to unfold. John and Patsy Ramsey were wealthy, respected, and socially active. Their 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét, was a beauty queen, a child pageant star with blonde curls, bright eyes, and a dazzling stage presence. Photos of her in sequin dresses, smiling under bright lights, would soon plaster newspapers across the nation. But for now, she was simply their little girl, tucked into bed after a long day of Christmas festivities. The next morning, December 26th, Patsy Ramsey woke early. She went downstairs to start breakfast. That's when she saw it. A 2.5-page ransom note, neatly laid out on the staircase. It was handwritten, in shaky block letters, demanding $118,000 for the safe return of JonBenét. The note claimed to be from a foreign faction, and instructed the Ramseys not to contact police. But within minutes, Patsy was dialing 911. Officers rushed to the house. Family friends arrived to console them. The home quickly filled with people, too many people, disturbing the crime scene before it could be secured. Hours passed. There was no sign of JonBenét. Then, in the basement, John Ramsey made a discovery that would burn itself into the memory of every detective who touched the case. There, behind a closed door in the wine cellar, lay the lifeless body of JonBenét. She was wrapped in a white blanket. A garrote, an improvised strangulation device, was tied around her neck. Her tiny wrists were bound. And yet, her parents had been searching the house for hours, with police present, before her father found her. From that moment, suspicion never left the Ramsey family. The ransom note itself was bizarre. Why demand exactly $118,000? Almost the same amount as John Ramsey's recent Christmas bonus. Why write 3 full pages when ransom notes are usually short, blunt, and hurried? Experts later concluded it was likely written inside the house, using paper and pens from the Ramseys' own kitchen. The investigation spiraled. Police thought the crime scene was staged. Patsy's handwriting was compared to the ransom note. No conclusive match, but unsettling similarities. John's demeanor was criticized. Calm. Almost too calm. The public was transfixed. Tabloids screamed accusations. Some said it was an intruder. Others pointed to the parents. Still others whispered about JonBenét's 9-year-old brother, Burke. Did he snap in a fit of jealousy? Did the parents cover it up? But no one was ever charged. The case remains open, unresolved, like a wound that never healed. What made JonBenét's story so haunting wasn't just the brutality of her death. It was the setting. A wealthy family. A safe neighborhood. A child, murdered in her own home with the killer never found. It told America something horrifying. Not only can your child vanish on the streets like Etan Patz, they can also be taken from you in the one place you think is safest. The Ramseys left Boulder under a storm of suspicion. Patsy died in 2006, never cleared in the eyes of many. John Ramsey still insists they are innocent, victims of both a crime and a witch hunt. JonBenét's image, tiaras, stage lights, beauty queen poses, remains etched into American culture, not just as a symbol of innocence lost, but as a reminder that some crimes may never, ever be solved. If JonBenét Ramsey's case showed that even the safety of a home could be violated, the story of Elizabeth Smart proved that nightmares don't end when the sun rises. Sometimes they begin in the middle of the night. It was June 5, 2002. Salt Lake City, Utah. The Smart family lived in a large, comfortable house nestled in the quiet foothills. Their daughter Elizabeth, a bright and kind 14-year-old, went to bed like any other night. Her younger sister, Mary Catherine, lay beside her. The air was still, the house silent. At around 2 a.m., Mary Catherine stirred awake. She saw a shadow in the room. A man. He held a knife against Elizabeth and whispered, "Come with me, or I'll kill your family." Elizabeth obeyed. Barefoot, trembling, she followed the stranger out of her own home, through the darkness, into the unknown. When the Smart family woke hours later, panic set in. Elizabeth's bed was empty, her room window wide open. Police were called, and within days, her face was on every television screen in America. A nationwide search began, but the trail was already cold. For 9 months, Elizabeth Smart was gone. Her abductor was Brian David Mitchell, a drifter with wild eyes and a messianic complex. He called himself Emmanuel, a prophet chosen by God. Alongside him was Wanda Barzee, his wife and accomplice, who believed his delusions and enforced his twisted rules. They dragged Elizabeth deep into the mountains above Salt Lake City, chaining her to a tree, covering her face with a veil. She was forced into silence, stripped of her identity, treated as property. Mitchell declared that she was his chosen bride, just a child trapped in the clutches of a man who believed he spoke for God. And yet, the world outside continued to search. The Smart family never stopped pleading for her return. Every news broadcast carried her name. But even as sightings trickled in, Mitchell kept Elizabeth hidden in plain sight, sometimes walking with her through neighborhoods, disguised in robes and veils, her face completely covered. 9 months later, in March 2003, Elizabeth's ordeal finally ended. It happened by chance. A couple of strangers noticed Mitchell, Barzee, and a veiled girl walking through Sandy, Utah. Something about the girl's eyes, peeking through the cloth, seemed familiar. Police were called. Elizabeth's identity was confirmed on the spot. When she was reunited with her family, the world gasped. She was alive. Thin, pale, traumatized, but alive. Elizabeth's case was a miracle in a genre filled with tragedies. But it also revealed something darker. How easily predators could manipulate belief, religion, and fear to control their victims. Mitchell and Barzy weren't criminal masterminds. They were unstable drifters. And yet, they held a young girl captive for nearly a year, just miles away from her own home. In court, Mitchell screamed biblical verses, insisting he was God's servant. Barzy muttered prayers. Both were eventually sentenced to life in prison. Elizabeth, however, refused to let her captors define her. She grew into a powerful advocate for victims of kidnapping and sexual abuse, using her own voice to give strength to others who had lost theirs. Her story became a symbol not of fear, but of survival. But the fear remained, because if someone could walk into a family home in the dead of night, knife in hand, and vanish with a child while her sister watched, what did that mean for everyone else who thought their doors and windows kept them safe? If Elizabeth Smart's 9 months in captivity shocked America, Jaycee Lee Dugard's story would reveal an even darker truth. Sometimes, the nightmare doesn't last months. It lasts decades. It was June 10, 1991, South Lake Tahoe, California. An ordinary suburban morning. Jaycee, just 11 years old, walked toward her school bus stop. She wore her pink jacket, carried her backpack, and looked back one last time at her house on the hill. Her stepfather, Carl Probin, stood by the garage watching. Then it happened. A gray car pulled up. A man leaned out the window, fired a stun gun. Jaycee collapsed. Before Carl could react, the stranger pulled her into the car and sped off. Carl jumped on his bicycle, pedaling furiously, chasing the vehicle down the street. But within seconds, it disappeared into the neighborhood maze. Jaycee was gone. For 18 years. The kidnapper was Philip Garrido, a convicted sex offender with a long history of violence. With him was his wife, Nancy. Together, they became jailers of an 11-year-old child. Jaycee was taken to Garrido's home in Antioch, California. Behind the house stood a maze of tents, sheds, and tarps, a hidden backyard compound. There, in the sweltering heat of summer and the freezing nights of winter, she was kept prisoner. For the first weeks, Garrido locked her in a soundproof shed. He assaulted her, brainwashed her, broke her sense of time. He called it God's plan. He made Jaycee feel invisible, powerless, erased. But she wasn't invisible. Not really. In the years that followed, Garrido paraded Jaycee in public, sometimes veiled, sometimes introduced as a relative. Nobody asked questions. Neighbors noticed odd things about the backyard, the tarps, the fences, but the police never searched deeply enough. Jaycee's world shrank to the backyard prison. There, she gave birth to 2 daughters, fathered by Garrido. She raised them in captivity, teaching them to read, protecting them as best she could in a place where freedom was just a rumor. Meanwhile, her mother, Terry Probin, never gave up hope. Every birthday, every holiday, she held vigils, pleading with the public, "Please don't forget my daughter." And then, in August 2009, after 18 years, the unthinkable happened. Garrido brought Jaycee, now a grown woman of 29, along with her 2 daughters, to a parole office. His erratic behavior and strange explanations drew suspicion. Officers noticed the children, shy and malnourished, who had never been to school. They questioned Jaycee. First, she gave a false name. But eventually, she whispered the words the world had long since stopped expecting. "I'm Jaycee Dugard." 18 years after vanishing, she was free. The revelation stunned the world. Jaycee had missed her teenage years, her 20s, entire chapters of her life, stolen by 2 predators who hid her in plain sight. Yet when she emerged, she carried herself with quiet strength. Philip and Nancy Garrido were sentenced to life in prison. Jaycee, meanwhile, published a memoir, speaking not as a victim, but as a survivor. Her story remains one of the most disturbing in American history, not just because of the length of her captivity, but because it exposed how easy it was for authorities to overlook warning signs. Police had visited the Garrido home multiple times over the years. Parole officers monitored Philip. Yet nobody ever discovered the hidden compound until it was too late. Jaycee's survival forced America to ask painful questions. How many other children were still out there, hidden in sheds, basements, or fields? How many more names would be etched into the endless list of the missing? May 3, 2007. Praia de Luz, Portugal. A picturesque seaside resort, the kind of place families escape to for sun, sand, and safety. But safety that night would prove to be an illusion. The McCann family, Jerry and Kate, along with their 3 children, including 3-year-old Madeleine, were on vacation. The adults enjoyed dinners at a tapas restaurant within the resort, only steps away from the apartment where the children slept. They checked on them every half hour, felt safe, controlled, responsible, until it wasn't. When Kate returned around 10 p.m., she opened the bedroom door and froze. Madeleine's bed was empty, the window wide open, the shutters raised. A chill swept over her as she screamed the words that would echo around the globe. "They've taken her." Within hours, police swarmed the resort. Tourists searched the streets with flashlights, calling her name. But there was no sign of the little girl with the big, curious eyes. What followed was a case unlike any other. Madeleine's disappearance became an international obsession. Newspapers across Europe and America plastered her face. TV anchors dissected every theory. A massive search effort spanned countries, with volunteers, detectives, and even celebrities joining the call, "Find Madeleine." But as days turned into weeks, suspicion spread. Portuguese police focused on the McCanns themselves, accusing them of negligence, even of hiding their daughter's death. No evidence ever proved this, but the shadow of suspicion destroyed reputations, divided communities, and left the family living under a microscope of judgment. Years passed. Leads surfaced, then evaporated. Sightings of girls who looked like Madeleine came in from Morocco, Spain, even Australia. Each one raised hopes, then shattered them again. In 2013, Scotland Yard reopened the investigation, identifying new suspects, including known child predators living near Praia de Luz at the time. One name resurfaced again and again: Christian Bruckner, a German drifter with a history of violent crimes against women and children. He lived in the Algarve region in 2007. His phone records placed him near the resort the night Madeleine vanished. In 2020, German prosecutors announced they believed Madeleine was dead, and that Bruckner was their prime suspect. But still, to this day, no body has been found. No conclusive evidence. Just endless questions, and a family waiting for answers. Madeleine McCann's disappearance remains one of the greatest mysteries of modern times. Etan Patz, JonBenét Ramsey, Elizabeth Smart, Jaycee Dugard, Madeleine McCann. Each name carries its own tragedy, its own horror, its own unanswered questions. Some were solved. Some ended in survival. Others remain shadows that haunt entire generations. But together, these stories reveal a chilling truth. Childhood can vanish in an instant. A bus stop, a bedroom, a vacation resort, a simple walk down the street. The terror is not just in the act itself, it's in the aftermath. The families left behind, torn between hope and despair. The communities that lock their doors tighter, afraid the darkness might creep closer. The detectives who age decades chasing leads that end in dead ends. And the questions that never go away. Where did they go? Who took them? And, perhaps most haunting of all, how many more are still out there waiting to be found? Some children, like Elizabeth Smart and Jaycee Dugard, return against all odds, carrying scars but also resilience. Others, like Etan Patz and Madeleine McCann, remain etched in photographs, frozen in time, forever young. Their stories are cautionary tales, but they are also testaments to endurance, to the unyielding will of families who never stop searching. Because as long as the missing are remembered, as long as their names are spoken, there is always hope, fragile, flickering, but alive. And that hope is what keeps the darkness from swallowing everything.